We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about
Everything Theater. Hi, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And bravo, Ellen is just off a very successful run at Schenectady Light Opera, which company slot, which was not doing opera or musical, the complete works of Shakespeare abridged.
Which apparently was news to some of their subscribers. Some people at intermission said, when are they going to start singing?
Too much. And in fact, that's a very well-known show. And I'm using this as the setup to get to our guest today.
I'm doing a show that 45 years ago got its start at the Lake George Dinner Theater, Sheer Madness. And I say that because you're in a well-established show. I'm in a well-established show. Our guest is in the show with me. He plays Tony. But R.P. McLaughlin, when he's not on stage, is intimately, exquisitely involved in getting new shows off the ground and around the country and shared. R.P., good to have you with us.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
So you have been serving as the interim director for the National New Play Network.
The Interim Programs Director. You gave me a title bump, Benita.
I'm like that. I'm always giving you, it's not that it would come with any more money, but, maybe I'm looking to tomorrow. But this is an organization that works with theaters around the country to get new plays seen and performed.
Yeah, National New Play Network. It's a member theater service organization. So it's designed to serve theater companies. We have over 120 members across the country, and its mission is to help the development, production, and continued life of new plays. And it's been doing that work for almost 25 years. It started 24 years and change ago by a man named David Goldman, who is at that time at the O'Neill Theater Center, who went to Chicago at a little theater company called Prop Theater and saw a dynamic new play and thought, this can't be the last time this play is produced. There has got to be a way to get second and third and fourth productions of these world premiere plays. And so he got a room of artistic directors together, which included Jack Ruler at Mixed Blood in Minneapolis and Seth Rosen at Interact in Philadelphia and others, and said, what can we do? How can we make this happen? And they created the network.
Talk about the success or challenges that it has experienced to get you to this point.
The organization has been hugely successful. It is most known, I think, by people who aren't in the network by two things. The broadest reach is something the network invented called the New Play Exchange, which is an online library of plays by living writers, which is miraculously and deliciously sortable. So it was the network's response to hearing people in the field say, if only I could find a two-hander by a woman playwright that's a comedy. And the network in 2015, with funding from some major national foundations, said, I think we can probably do something about that. So New Play Exchange now has tens of thousands of plays by living writers on it, and over 1 million members, subscribers, because we have multiple educational institutions who provide access to their student bodies. And it's only, 8 years old, which is pretty fantastic. And the other thing that people most likely would know the network for is the premiere program, which is called the Rolling World Premiere. And this kind of came from that initial desire to get continued life into new and world premiere plays. And so the Rolling World Premiere program provides funding for a previously unproduced play for 3 member theaters to produce within 18 months of each other. And they have to commit to production before the first one goes into rehearsal. And the network provides funding to the theaters, it provides funding to the playwright, and it provides support throughout the process and development of that play. And for me individually, I mean, I got started with the network as a producer in residence, which is another program of the network. It's the idea that, hey, we should probably have a pipeline for young people who want to work in the new play field. And we know that these new play theaters need support. So can the network get some funding and create a program around that need? And so I was a beneficiary of that. And I was uniquely placed at the network, not at a member theater. So I got the fabulous experience of a bird's eye view of that kind of national landscape of new play theaters and new play development. And so when the current programs director went on leave for the summer, I got a call from the executive director saying, hey, do you want to fill in for a few months? And so I've been very happy to do that.
Now, we talk about this on the podcast all the time about the joy and love of new work, but the challenge for a company. I am artistic director at Albany Civic, and I directed Jump by Charlie Yvonne Simpson last season, which was not a well-known play.
But we know it.
But you guys know, yeah.
We know it, and we know Charlie very well. Charlie has had at least 1, maybe 2 Rolling World premieres with the network. And I met her, I believe, at the MFA Playwrights Workshop at the Kennedy Center a handful of years ago.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, the play is phenomenal. I loved it. And every single person who came in said, this play is great. Why have we not heard of it? Why is no one else doing it? But yet the other thing they said is, why aren't more people in this audience right now? And it's because no one had heard of it before. So what do you say to theaters and leaders of theaters about taking the risk of putting a new title in their season?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. I would say that they should look up something called the Triple Play Project. So the Triple Play Project was a research project that was a collaboration between the National New Play Network, Theater Development Fund based in New York City, and Theater Bay Area based in San Francisco. And what the Triple Play Project was looking at was, why and how do we get single ticket buyers to come see new plays? And can we think about answering that question by putting administrators, playwrights, and audience members in direct conversation? And I was the research coordinator for that project. So I know I could talk about that for hours. I encourage both of you and anyone listening to go look up the Triple Play Project, read the executive summary. The thing that comes most to mind, that most immediately speaks to your question, is new plays to us as theater makers are often previously unproduced, not a major New York run plays. New plays to theater goers is any play they haven't heard of, which is most of them. Yeah. So we know, I assume most people listening to this podcast know who Sarah Rule is, and we know that she's brilliant. And if Sarah Rule is writing a play, we want to go see it. Susan, who buys a single ticket for her and her 3 gal pals who like to go out on Thursday, doesn't know at all who Sarah Rule is. So we have this perception of risk that isn't always really borne out in the reality of what the theater goer experiences when they're looking to go see a play. So the first thing I would say is what you think is the risk might not be what it actually is. And the second thing I would say, which is also borne out in that research, is that many theater goers are incentivized by risk. So we often talk ourselves out of what makes us compelling, and that risk can be that thing. Find a way to talk about the work in ways that get in on the ground floor, see it before it becomes the next big thing, be a part of the process of development, turn that risk on its head so that it's not something we have to be scared of or hide in the shadows from, but actually becomes our value proposition. It becomes the thing that we rally audience members around, and they feel pride about that. There's a pride in being a single ticket buyer or a subscriber or a donor to insert theater company here, because at this company, they're doing new things I get to be in at the ground level, and build your audience around that, what you actually want to do. Don't apologize for it. Make it the headline.
You know, while your enthusiasm is infectious about that, it also happens at a time when we're seeing theater companies, well-respected theater companies, pull back, cut back on their seasons, close their doors. So that only serves to make folks say, let me pull out a golden oldie that everyone knows, and I'll bring them out. That this is not the time to be experimental. The challenge becomes that much greater when, to your point, that may be actually the time to take that step, to make the challenge. So how do you respond to the theaters who say to you, I'd love to vote?
Yeah, I mean, I am very sensitive to the financial realities of what it means to be producing theater. I was the manager of strategic advancement at Studio Theater in Washington, D.C. I've had the great fortune of looking at the financial statements of dozens of theater companies across the country. So I'm not a cavalier artist who's flippant about the realities of those things. And what I would say to them is I would again challenge what some of their assumptions are. And I would before that ask them, what is your mission? What have you written down, right? But also, what is your operational mission? How does your mission actually have legs? What do you actually do? And what do you actually want to do? And I would feel around what that is and try and incentivize those theater makers to get closer to their identity, to be more specific and targeted in what it is they want to do, what it is they're saying the audience member gets when they buy a ticket. Because
let me jump in, RP. How many companies actually do that? How many of them really have a mission that specific and then adhere to it?
Not enough would be my opinion. And it's trite, but it's true. When you try to be all things to all people, you are nothing to nobody. And I think as in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, as we see regional theaters making huge capital investments and having then the burden of being landlords and having huge capital expenses that continue, the financial demands put on institutions, I think, have, for some companies, forced them to make choices that push them away from their identity, push them away from the actual reason people were coming to their organization.
Do you have a for instance?
I don't have a for instance, but I mean, I have many for instances, but to point out one would obfuscate the systemic problem because it's not about a particular theater. It is about the system of incentives that those theaters operated under. They weren't alone, right? And you can talk about funding models and all of that. That's for, a boring dissertation and something that other people want to read. But I think moving closer to what you actually want to be as a company, understanding that your company has an identity and that has likely been, if you've been around for a long time, diluted over time, and that is actually a real major liability and risk. I think of companies like Woolly Mammoth Theater Company in Washington, D.C., and I think of companies like Florida Studio Theater Company in Sarasota. These are very different companies with very different missions and very different ideal audience bases. Now, they're both producing in a very difficult time to be producing theater. But from my outsider's perspective, they seem to be weathering the storm rather well. And my armchair theory about that is they are both companies that know who they are and they are unapologetic about it. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is who we serve. And they go after that. They don't let the tail wag the dog. They say, no, I have a job. I'm an artistic director. I'm a curator. I have a responsibility. And this is what we're going to do. I think that's the thing to cling to. But it's scary. I mean, it's easy to say. It's very difficult to do when you're a leader in charge of, an annual operating budget of $5, $10, $20 million. And you're looking at laying off people who have sometimes been with an organization for decades. I mean, it's very easy to talk about. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Well, but I think case in point, I'm going to throw out Harbinger Theater. It's a theater here that we love and who are very supportive of our podcast. But they have done, they opened last year and they do all regional premieres.
Mm-hmm.
And their audiences have grown exponentially. Every time I go, the houses are packed. And I think it's because they're doing stuff that no one else is doing. They're, people are excited by the work of seeing new things.
And they're doing also, RP, what you suggest, what you're preaching. Be unapologetic about it and promote it. Don't go, gee, where I may eat up. No, I mean, they are big sponsors of us. We have a lot of theater in the area that won't make the investment, doesn't recognize, and we're not that expensive, doesn't recognize that if you don't tell people what you've got, the options for entertainment are so vast, they won't come to you.
Well, the research tells us, what's the greatest predictor of arts engagement, like buying a ticket to go to the theater? The greatest predictor is childhood exposure to the arts. The second greatest predictor is previous exposure to the arts in that calendar year. So more art going begets more art going. The pie is not finite. Scarcity mentality is not helpful. That doesn't mean we have to be Pollyanna and just pretend like the world is our oyster and there is no limit and budgets don't matter. No. That's not what I'm talking about. The collaboration within a community to create an identity of the community of theater going. It doesn't happen as much as, I think it's happening more, which is good. It doesn't happen as much as I would love to see. The network, the National New Play Network, I think is a gold standard of theater to theater collaboration. It is the cornerstone of that organization. And it is, I think, the reason for its continued success.
Is the
Theater
network
to theater.
growing? Right. Are more theaters signing up, paying, if you will, the dues to
Yes.
be part of this?
Yes. So when I started with the network in 2014 as an intern, I think there were 75 members, and now there are 135 members, something like that. So it is growing. It is growing.
You know, locally, our Lord Theater locally is Capitol Repertory Theater, and they put on a new play festival every year. And I don't know what the numbers are, but I've been in the audience, and it appears that it's quite successful. Not only they do that, but they also do a program for juveniles, you know, to write, who are writing and produce their shows as well. And I don't know, is that unique to the experience in new play writing that you CRP, or getting teens involved is a growing area?
I think it happens a lot. I think a lot of theater companies across the country have some version of, let's get young people in the room, let's teach them and get them to write a play together, and then let's present that work. And I think that that is great, fantastic, worthwhile, life-changing work, not only for those kids, but also for the future of our field. And anybody who's been to those things will tell you that sometimes what these young people make will knock your socks off. You know, they don't know what they're doing, but it doesn't matter, you know?
Is it that they don't so much know what they're doing, or that they're not constrained by rules that they haven't adopted or felt they have to play by yet?
I think it's both things, for sure. Yeah. And that's good. I mean, that's wonderful. And it speaks to another thing, I think, that excites me about a theater company, that I think is an increasingly important thing for theater companies to do, which is transitioning, or it may not be transitioning, but understanding that there is a difference between a transactional relationship and a relationship. So a transactional relationship is like, I go to this theater company because they're doing Mamma Mia, and boy, did I love Meryl Streep, and I'd love to see it live. So you buy the single tickets and you take your friends and you go see it and you have a great time, and you may or may not go back to that theater. That's a transaction. You're just buying a thing. But what I think theaters need to do more of is develop actual ongoing relationships. And I think the kind of community involvement, yeah, the kind of community involvement that those playwriting programs with young people can provide, it doesn't inherently provide it. Just because you do it doesn't mean you're actually involved in the community, right? It doesn't mean you're actually developing relationships with those families, right? But it means you could, right? That's, I think that is a real way to expand the square footage of the appeal for someone to come to your theater, right? There's the surface reason of like, well, it's a play and it's valuable and it's a good story and it's well done, although it's not always well done, and we have to own that too. Sometimes people don't come because it's not very good, right? We have to own that, you know. But if we can expand the footprint of reasons why people want to go, their attendance will be stickier. They'll be harder to lose once we get them. But if we narrow it just to more and more transactional theater going, big budget musicals, which, listen, I'm a musical theater actor. I love a big budget musical, but big budget musicals are not going to save the regional theater movement, right? And that's a little bit the operating theory sometimes. But expanding the footprint of reasons why an average theater goer comes, I think, is probably a better allocation of your resources and time and investment. I think it'll pay off more.
Now I'm curious from the playwright's perspective. So playwright has a great show they've written, and they're like, what do I do with my script? Is this something that they can submit? How do you have your network of plays?
So the network the plays are sourced from within the network from member theaters. So like the network itself doesn't do like an open submission for plays, because we're kind of like a business to business organization, right? Theater to theater, right? That's what we do. But the network created a platform called the New Play Exchange, which is designed to provide a space for a writer to put their work to potentially be discovered. We also have opportunities are released on New Play Exchange. So if I'm a theater company and I could just submit an open call, there's nothing wrong with that. But I might be looking for something specific. So I could go on the New Play Exchange as a theater company and release an opportunity that's specifically looking for writers to share their work. If it's a two-hander, that's a comedy, that's, by a Latin A writer, right? It can be that granular. So the New Play Exchange is a great place to put your stuff. But this business, I think, is a business of relationships. And I think a lot of it has to do with developing those relationships, submitting to festivals, submitting to readings, submitting to developmental processes, going to theater, developing relationships. Very often work gets moved around by either a director who's really passionate about the writer's work, or a dramaturg who's really passionate about the writer's work, or another writer who's maybe a little further along in their career who's really passionate about the work to that theater. But there are as many ways to get that first production as there are new plays. There are many, many, many paths.
And on the flip side, and you talked a little bit about it, but to follow up on Ellen's question, if Ellen and I are doing a show, we've got a theater, we want to do a show, and we're looking for a three-hander with by an African-American writer, can I reach out to the network and say, I'm looking for this, and do you have something for me?
You don't need to. You just sign up for a New Play Exchange profile, which is $10 a year. And yeah, you heard that right, $10 a year. And you just search and you find, it'll populate. I bet that description would have, 175 results. And you just go through, and many, many, many of the plays have downloads immediately available. So you can just take a perusal copy. Many of the plays who don't have a sample download. So you might get a scene or two. And you can always reach out directly to the writer or their representation and say, hey, I'm Benita Zahn, and I'm interested in reading a copy of this play because it looks really compelling to me. And then you read that play and you love it, but it's not right for you. So you go back to the New Play Exchange and you write a recommendation on that play's profile saying, hey, I'm Benita Zahn, and I've been doing theater for a really long time, and I know what I'm talking about, and this play is marvelous. Someone should produce it. We wanted to, it just wasn't quite right for us. And so the next time someone looks at that play, there's a recommendation or two or four to look at and go, oh, okay, maybe I'll take a look at this.
And how do royalties work on that?
It's always negotiated between the writer and or their representative and whatever the producing entity is. So New Play Exchange we're truly just a service. It's truly a service to the field. It is a platform. That's it.
That's fascinating. Now, we only have 5 minutes left, and we have a little fun segment. We've talked so much about this wonderful organization that I know all our listeners are going to run out and check out immediately. Yeah. But now we want to know a little bit more about you, RP. So this is our close-up segment. It's some just rapid-fire questions about you personally. So RP, are you ready for your close-up?
I'm ready.
When was the moment when you knew, I have to do theater?
Oh, I was 12 years old at a little school called Galaxy Center for the Arts at like 11:45, far past my bedtime when I should have been home, like wrapping cable after hanging lights for a production of Scheherazade that we were doing that weekend. And I was tired and the happiest I had been in like my young child's memory. And I thought, if I can love wrapping cable, I probably have to do this for the rest of my life.
And what's a play that's had a big impact on you, whether it's something you worked on or something you saw or read?
Honestly, Sheer Madness, the play that Benita and I are doing right now, most of my professional career has been in the administrative and producing world, and I've really only in the last year and a half taken a full step back into acting. That my degree is in acting, but and doing Sheer Madness, this is the second time. I did it one other time earlier this year with Bruce Jordan in Tampa. It really, working with him, working on this play in this role, kind of gave me a bit of confidence and a bit of, go get 'em energy that I needed. And so I think I will remember this play as kind of a turning point in my career.
Is there a dream show or even more specifically a dream role that
Oh my gosh.
did?
Put Sondheim's catalog on a wall and throw a dart and there's a dream role, Like, could I just do it all? Could I do every Sondheim show?
I can attest to the fact we had this conversation backstage. And we also usually ask, and I think you've got some stories about the craziest thing that has ever gone awry on stage.
Oh, goodness. The craziest thing that has ever gone awry on stage. I was doing a production of Sweeney Todd, and our Joanna's corset was too tight, and it was a multi-level production. And she's singing, I think she's singing Greenfinch at Lynetburg. And I'm on stage, or maybe I'm off stage right, and I notice Lydia she sounds something's, and like at exactly the last second that it would have been useful to recognize it, I recognized that she's fainting. And so I like charge up the escape stairs and like catch her. And then, she gets off stage and everything, the corset gets loosened and everything is fine. But that's probably up there in the list of craziest things.
Okay, you win.
Yeah. Who are you playing?
That was in high school, so I was playing Sweeney.
You're Sweeney. I was like, if you're Anthony, you're a true hero.
I know, right? The love story everyone wants to see.
Wow. It has been a sheer delight. Sheer madness, sheer delight. I don't know, try something there. Sheer delight talking to you, RP. This is such great information for our listeners. Thank you so much for all this insight.
Thank you for having me. What a joy to be here. Thank you for having this podcast and talking about what we do. It's a real service, and I'm grateful that you're doing it and that I could be a very small part of it.
Thank you.
Real quickly,
so
Benita,
much.
remind us how long Sheer Madness runs so everybody can catch you guys.
We run through August 26th at we're at the Holiday Inn in Lake George. There's matinees on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, evening shows Wednesday through Saturday. There are still some tickets available. I understand the food is fabulous. Almost as good as the entertainment, but I'm a little biased. So come on up and see RP as Tony, and I'm Mrs. Schubert. And let me thank you as well, RP. I've been treated to your conversations about this backstage and how important this is for the continuation of theater. And these are challenging times, so let's go get them.
And on that, I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.